Have you ever wondered why no amount of love ever seems to be enough? Why, even after being chosen, you still fear being abandoned? Why compliments fade so quickly, but one rejection can stay with you for years? Most people believe the deepest pain in their lives came from being left by someone they loved, a partner, a friend, a parent, someone they trusted with their heart. But what if that's not the wound that's hurting you the most? What if the greatest abandonment of your life didn't happen the day someone walked away? What if it happened the day you started walking away from yourself? The day you stopped listening to your own needs? The day you silenced your truth just to keep the peace? The day you began measuring your worth through someone else's approval? The day you decided that being chosen by others mattered more than choosing yourself? Since then, you've been searching for the right person, the right relationship, the right words, the right amount of love that would finally quiet the voice inside you that keeps asking, am I enough? You've tried harder, loved harder, given more, sacrificed more, hoping that one day someone would finally arrive and give you what you've been missing. But what if no one can give you what you keep refusing to give yourself? The Buddha taught that the root of suffering is not that we love too much. It is that we search outside ourselves for what can only be awakened within. So tonight, I want to invite you into a different kind of journey. Not a journey toward becoming someone new, but a journey back to the person you were before the world convinced you that love had to be earned. Because by the end of this video, you may stop asking, who will finally love me enough? And begin asking the question that could transform your entire life. Why did I ever believe I was unworthy of my own love? And perhaps, for the very first time, you'll stop searching for home in other people and finally remember the way back to yourself. The ELOV you keep chasing has always lived within you. Most people spend their entire lives searching for love, not just romantic love. They search for someone who understands them, someone who chooses them, someone who makes them feel important, someone who finally says the words they have been waiting to hear their whole life. You matter. You are enough. You don't have to prove yourself anymore. And maybe you know exactly what that feels like. Maybe you have spent years hoping that the next person would finally heal what the last person broke. Maybe you've thought, if I could just find the right partner, I would finally be happy. If this person stays, I will finally feel secure. If they choose me, I will finally believe that I am worthy of love. At first, these thoughts seem harmless. After all, love is beautiful. Human connection is natural. We all want to be seen. We all want to belong. We all want to know that we matter to someone. The Buddha never said that wanting love is wrong. He understood the human heart. He understood loneliness. He understood grief. He understood the pain of losing people we deeply care about. But he also saw something that most people never notice. He saw that suffering begins when we expect another human being to give us something they were never meant to provide. We ask people to make us feel whole. We ask them to silence our insecurities. We ask them to erase our fear of being abandoned. We ask them to heal wounds that existed long before they entered our lives. And without realizing it, we place the weight of our happiness into hands that cannot carry it. Then our entire emotional world becomes unstable. A delayed reply ruins our day. A cold tone of voice fills us with anxiety. A disagreement feels like rejection. Someone needing space feels like proof that we are not enough. Their attention becomes our happiness. Their approval becomes our confidence. Their presence becomes our peace, and their absence becomes our suffering. Little by little, we hand over the keys to our emotional life until we become strangers to ourselves. The Buddha taught that everything outside of us is constantly changing. People change, feelings change, relationships change, circumstances change. Even the people who love us deeply cannot promise that they will remain exactly the same forever. Yet we try to build permanent security on things that are temporary, and this is where suffering quietly begins. But perhaps the saddest part is that this pattern often starts long before adulthood. Think back to when you were younger. How often were you loved simply because you existed? Not because you achieved something, not because you behaved perfectly, not because you made everyone proud, just because you were you. For many people, love slowly became connected to performance. You learned that being good earned praise. Being quiet avoided conflict. Being helpful made people appreciate you. Being successful made people proud. Being needed made people keep you around. Without realizing it, you began believing that love had conditions. You started thinking, I have to earn my place. I have to become who people want me to be. I have to prove that I deserve to stay. And so you adapted. You became agreeable. You became useful. You became the listener, the helper, the peacemaker, the one who never asks for too much, the one who says, I'm fine, even when falling apart inside. You smiled when your heart was tired. You ignored your needs. You abandoned your truth, because deep down you feared that if people saw the real you, they might leave. So you worked harder, loved harder, gave more, sacrificed more, hoping that eventually someone would finally say, you don't have to try anymore, you're already enough. But no matter how much love you received, something still felt empty. No compliment lasted long enough. No relationship completely removed the fear. No achievement permanently silenced the voice inside that whispered, what if I'm still not enough? And perhaps this confused you, because from the outside, it looked like you had everything you needed. People loved you, people cared about you, people admired you. Yet inside, there was still a quiet hunger, a longing that never seemed fully satisfied. Not because you were ungrateful, not because you were broken, but because you had unknowingly disconnected from the very place where love begins. The truth the Buddha pointed toward is both simple and life-changing. You were never born incomplete. You did not enter this world missing half of yourself. You were not created lacking worth. You did not arrive here needing another person to prove that you deserve to exist. Before anyone chose you, you were enough. Before anyone rejected you, you were enough. Before anyone praised you, you were enough. Before anyone betrayed you, you were enough. Your worth has never been determined by another person's ability to recognize it. The love you seek in others, the acceptance you long for, the safety you dream of, the understanding you desperately hope someone will give you, these are qualities you can begin offering yourself. This does not mean you stop loving others. It does not mean you stop wanting companionship. It does not mean you isolate yourself from the world. The Buddha never taught people to stop loving. He taught them how to love without losing themselves. He taught them how to care deeply without becoming dependent, how to connect without clinging, how to give without emptying their own soul. Because there is a difference between saying, I choose to walk beside you, and saying, I need you to survive. One is love. The other is fear. Love says, I cherish you, but I do not abandon myself. Fear says, if you leave, I will lose who I am. Love gives freedom. Fear creates attachment. Love creates peace. Fear creates suffering. Imagine what would happen if you truly understood this. Imagine waking up each morning, no longer believing that your worth depends on being chosen. Imagine no longer shrinking yourself to keep people comfortable. Imagine no longer begging for the bare minimum while calling it love. Imagine no longer chasing those who repeatedly fail to see your value. Imagine being able to love people deeply without making them responsible for your happiness. How different would your relationships become? How different would your life become? You would still feel sadness when people leave. You would still experience heartbreak. You would still grieve because you are human. But you would not lose yourself. You would not question your worth. You would not collapse into the belief that someone's inability to love you means you are unlovable, because your roots would grow deeper than another person's opinion. Your home would no longer exist in someone else's hands. it would exist within you. Maybe for years you have been standing outside your own heart, knocking on doors, waiting for strangers to give you permission to love yourself, waiting for someone else to tell you that you matter, waiting for another person to finally complete a story that was never incomplete to begin with. But what if you stopped waiting? What if you sat beside your loneliness instead of running from it? What if you listened to your own pain instead of distracting yourself from it? What if you spoke to yourself with the same kindness you offer people you love? What if you became the safe place you have always been searching for? What if the person you've been waiting for your entire life has been waiting for you too? The version of you that no longer abandons themselves. The version of you that stops asking the world, "Am I enough?" because they already know the answer. The deepest form of love is not finding someone who finally convinces you that you matter. The deepest form of love is remembering that your worth never disappeared. It was never lost. It was never taken from you. It has been quietly living beneath your fears, beneath your insecurities, beneath your desperate search for approval, waiting patiently for your return. Perhaps this lesson is not asking you to become someone new. Perhaps it is inviting you to remember who you were before the world taught you to look for yourself in the eyes of others. And maybe tonight, instead of asking, "Who will finally love me enough?" you ask a different question. How long have I been withholding love from myself? Because the love you keep chasing, the peace you keep seeking, the home you have been longing to find, has never been somewhere far away. It has always lived within you, and the journey back to it begins the moment you choose to come home. The world taught you to seek your worth in others. Have you in Serins Halid Sortarat Waltishan you? No one is born believing they are unworthy of love. No child enters this world thinking, "I need to prove that I deserve to exist. I have to earn affection. I am only valuable if people approve of me." A child simply is. They laugh freely. They cry without shame. They express their needs without apology. They do not question whether they deserve kindness. They do not look in the mirror and ask, "Am I enough?" They assume they are worthy simply because they are alive. But somewhere along the way, many of us forget this truth. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, the world begins teaching us lessons we never agreed to learn. Some of these lessons come from our families. Some come from school. Some come from friendships, some come from heartbreak, and some come from a society that constantly tells us who we should be in order to be accepted. Without realizing it, we absorb these messages. If you get good grades, people will be proud of you. If you look attractive, people will choose you. If you are successful, people will respect you. If you never upset anyone, people will stay. If you are useful enough, people will need you. Little by little, love becomes connected to performance. You stop believing that you deserve love because you exist. Instead, you begin believing that love is a reward, something you must earn, something you can lose, something that depends on how well you meet other people's expectations. And this changes everything. You become afraid of disappointing others. You become afraid of making mistakes. You become afraid of saying no. You become afraid of showing the parts of yourself that are messy, emotional, uncertain, or imperfect. Because deep inside, you begin carrying a painful belief. If people see the real me, they might stop loving me. So you adapt. You become who the world rewards. You become the responsible one, the strong one, the funny one, the achiever, the caretaker, the peacemaker, the person who never causes trouble, the person who always says yes, the person who carries everyone's burdens while silently ignoring their own. You learn to read people's moods before they speak. You learn to anticipate their needs before they ask. You learn how to become whatever version of yourself makes others comfortable. But there is a hidden cost to this survival strategy. Every time you abandon your truth to gain acceptance, you move further away from yourself. Every time you silence your needs to avoid rejection, you teach yourself that your needs do not matter. Every time you betray your own heart to keep someone else's approval, you send yourself a devastating message: who I truly am is not enough. Over time, this belief becomes the lens through which you see the world. You begin measuring your worth through other people's reactions. If someone praises you, you feel valuable. If someone criticizes you, you feel ashamed. If someone chooses you, you feel lovable. If someone leaves you, you feel broken. Your identity rises and falls according to how others respond to you. And this is an exhausting way to live, because people are constantly changing. Someone can love you deeply and still misunderstand you. Someone can appreciate you and still leave. Someone can reject you for reasons that have nothing to do with your worth. Human beings are complicated. They carry their own fears, their own wounds, their own limitations. Yet many of us spend our lives allowing imperfect human beings to decide how we should feel about ourselves. The Buddha saw the suffering hidden within this pattern. He understood that the mind becomes trapped whenever it seeks permanence in things that are unstable. Approval is unstable. Praise is unstable. Popularity is unstable. Other people's opinions are unstable. Even the people who adore you cannot consistently validate you every moment of your life. And if your sense of worth depends entirely on external approval, your peace becomes fragile. You live in fear, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of criticism, fear of disappointing others, fear of being seen exactly as you are. And perhaps this fear has followed you for years. Maybe it explains why you overthink every conversation, why you replay awkward moments in your head at night, why you apologize for things that are not your fault, why you struggle to set boundaries, why saying no fills you with guilt, why you tolerate treatment you know you do not deserve, why you work so hard to make everyone else happy while neglecting yourself. Because somewhere deep inside, there is still a part of you trying to earn the love that should have never been conditional in the first place. There is still a part of you whispering, if I do enough, if I give enough, if I become enough, then maybe people won't leave. But the painful truth is this: you can spend your entire life trying to become everything for everyone and still meet people who cannot love you. Not because you are unworthy, but because no amount of self-sacrifice can guarantee acceptance. You cannot control how others see you. You cannot force people to understand your heart. You cannot perform your way into permanent security. The Buddha taught that freedom begins with seeing clearly, seeing the false beliefs that have quietly ruled your life. And perhaps one of the most important truths you will ever realize is this: you do not have to earn your worth. You do not have to audition for love. You do not have to prove that you deserve kindness. You do not have to exhaust yourself trying to become acceptable to everyone. Your value is not created by approval. It is not increased by praise. And it is not destroyed by rejection. The sun does not become less beautiful because someone closes their eyes. A flower does not lose its fragrance because someone walks past without noticing it. And you do not lose your worth simply because another person failed to recognize it. You were worthy before they applauded you. You were worthy before they ignored you. You were worthy before they chose you. You were worthy after they left. Nothing another person does has the power to remove the dignity that already exists within you. The journey of healing begins when you stop asking the world to tell you who you are. When you stop building your identity from borrowed opinions. When you stop chasing validation from people who are also trying to figure out their own worth. And instead you begin turning inward. You begin listening to your own voice, honoring your own needs, trusting your own wisdom, treating yourself with the same respect you offer others so freely. Perhaps for most of your life, the world taught you to look outward for permission. Permission to rest, permission to speak, permission to take up space, permission to believe you are enough. But maybe the next chapter of your life begins differently. Maybe healing is not becoming more impressive. Maybe awakening is not becoming more perfect. Maybe freedom is simply remembering what the world made you forget. That before anyone told you who you should be, before anyone judged you, before anyone approved of you, before anyone rejected you, you already belonged. You already mattered. You were already enough. And the moment you stop handing other people the authority to define your value, you begin reclaiming the love, peace and freedom that have always been yours. Because the world may have taught you to seek your worth in others, but wisdom teaches you to return home to yourself. What you call love is often the fear of being alone. One of the hardest truths to accept is this: not everything we call love is actually love. Sometimes what we call love is fear. Fear of being left behind, fear of being forgotten, fear of sleeping alone, fear of having no one to text, fear of watching everyone else move forward while we remain standing still, fear of facing the silence within ourselves. And because these fears are painful, we often mistake them for devotion. We say things like, "I can't live without them. They are my everything. I don't know who I am without this person. If they leave me, my life is over." The world hears these words and calls them romantic. Movies celebrate them. Songs glorify them. Stories convince us that true love means losing ourselves completely in another person. That real love should consume us. That obsession is passion. That emotional dependence is proof of devotion. But the Buddha saw something very different. He understood that love and attachment are not the same thing. Because love brings peace, attachment brings fear. Love creates freedom. Attachment creates control. Love allows another person to breathe. Attachment grips tightly, terrified of loss. Many people do not realize that they have spent years confusing these two experiences. They think they miss the person, but sometimes they miss the feeling of not being alone. They think they cannot live without that relationship, but sometimes they simply do not know how to live with themselves. This is not something to judge. It is something to understand, because underneath attachment is often a frightened heart, a heart that learned very early that being alone was dangerous. Perhaps you experienced abandonment. Perhaps someone important left. Perhaps love in your life was inconsistent, present one day, gone the next, warm one moment, cold the next. Maybe affection had conditions attached to it. Maybe attention had to be earned. Maybe being ignored felt unbearable. Slowly, your nervous system learned a painful lesson. Being alone means I am unsafe. Being unwanted means I am unworthy. Being left means I am not enough. And from that moment forward, relationships stopped being simple connections. They became survival. You no longer chose people because they aligned with your values. You chose people because they relieved your fear. You tolerated disrespect because loneliness felt worse. You ignored red flags because the thought of losing someone terrified you. You accepted crumbs because having a little love seemed better than having none. You stayed in places that drained your spirit because leaving meant facing the emptiness inside yourself. And perhaps you've called this loyalty. Perhaps you've called this commitment. Perhaps you've called this unconditional love. But deep down, if you're honest with yourself, maybe it wasn't love. Maybe it was fear wearing love's clothing. Think about how attachment behaves. Attachment constantly worries. It asks, do they still love me? Why haven't they replied? What if they meet someone better? What if I lose them? What if they stop choosing me? It scans every conversation for signs of rejection. It overthinks every silence. It creates stories that have not happened. It turns uncertainty into panic. Even during moments of happiness, attachment whispers, don't relax. You could lose this at any moment. So even when you finally receive the love you wanted, you cannot enjoy it. Because fear steals your ability to be present. You hold someone close while secretly preparing for their departure. You hear "I love you" and immediately wonder, for how long? You receive affection but cannot fully trust it. Because attachment is built upon anxiety. It does not know how to rest. Love, however, feels different. Love does not demand ownership. It does not require another person to abandon themselves for your comfort. Love says, I appreciate your presence without controlling your freedom. Love says, I care for you deeply while remembering that you do not belong to me. Love says, I can survive loss without losing myself. The Buddha taught that everything in life changes. People change, bodies change, circumstances change. Even the most beautiful moments eventually pass. This truth can feel frightening, but it can also be liberating, because once you accept impermanence, you stop trying to imprison life. You stop squeezing people so tightly that they cannot breathe. You stop expecting guarantees that no human being can honestly provide. You begin learning how to love with open hands. Open hands can hold, but they can also release. Open hands appreciate, but they do not possess. Open hands say, I am grateful for this moment, even though I know it cannot last forever. This kind of love requires courage, because attachment says, if they leave, I will be destroyed. Love says, if they leave, I will grieve, but I will remain. And perhaps that is what scares us most, not losing another person, but discovering who we are without them. Many people stay attached because they have built their entire identity around being needed, being chosen, being someone's partner, being someone's source of happiness. Without those roles, they feel empty, invisible, lost. But maybe the emptiness you fear is not punishment. Maybe it is an invitation to finally meet yourself, to sit quietly without distraction, to discover who you are beneath the relationships, beneath the roles, beneath the expectations, beneath the endless pursuit of being loved. Who are you when no one is watching? What brings you peace? What makes your soul come alive? What dreams have you neglected while trying to keep others close? What parts of yourself have been waiting patiently for your attention? Loneliness often becomes a doorway. At first it feels uncomfortable. The silence feels heavy. The absence feels unbearable. You reach for your phone. You replay old memories. You fantasize about people returning. You look for distractions, anything to avoid sitting with yourself. But if you stay long enough, something beautiful begins to happen. You realize that solitude is not the enemy you believed it to be. You realize that your own presence is not something to fear. You begin speaking to yourself more kindly, listening to your own needs, comforting your own sadness, celebrating your own victories. You become less desperate for rescue because you learn how to become a refuge for yourself. And this changes the way you love. You stop chasing unavailable people. You stop begging people to choose you. You stop shrinking yourself to fit inside relationships that require your self-abandonment. Because love no longer becomes a desperate attempt to escape loneliness. It becomes a conscious choice, a beautiful addition to an already meaningful life. The greatest irony is this: the more afraid you are of being alone, the more likely you are to lose yourself in unhealthy relationships. But the more at peace you become with your own company, the healthier your love becomes. Because you no longer say, I need you to save me. Instead, you say, I choose to share this journey with you. That is the difference between attachment and love. One comes from fear. The other comes from freedom. One says, complete me. The other says, I was already whole before we met. Perhaps this lesson is not asking you to stop loving. Perhaps it is teaching you to love differently, to love without chains, to care without control, to cherish without clinging, to allow people to be human without making them responsible for your entire emotional world. And maybe tonight you can ask yourself a question that has the power to change your life. Do I truly miss this person, or am I afraid of being alone? Do not answer too quickly. Sit with it. Listen carefully, because hidden beneath that answer may be the beginning of your freedom. The moment you stop using relationships to escape yourself, you finally discover that being alone does not mean being unloved. It simply means returning to the one person who has been with you through every joy, every heartbreak, every failure, and every triumph. You, and perhaps the love story your soul has been waiting for all along, is the one that begins when you stop fearing your own company and finally learn to sit beside yourself in peace. You abandoned yourself to keep others from leaving. One of the most painful truths you may ever discover is this: many of us were never abandoned by others first. We abandoned ourselves first, long before people walked away, long before relationships ended, long before someone stopped choosing us. We had already stopped choosing ourselves. We silenced our own voice, ignored our own needs, betrayed our own truth, and called it love. Perhaps you know exactly what this feels like. You say yes when every part of you wants to say no. You apologize even when you have done nothing wrong. You tolerate disrespect because you don't want to create conflict. You laugh at jokes that hurt your feelings. You pretend not to mind when people cross your boundaries. You stay quiet to keep the peace. You hide your sadness so no one thinks you're too much. You make yourself smaller so others can remain comfortable. And little by little, without even realizing it, you disappear. At first, it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels practical. You tell yourself, I'm just being understanding. I'm trying to be a good person. I don't want to upset anyone. I just want everyone to be happy. But eventually, a quiet exhaustion begins to grow inside you, because there is a difference between kindness and self-abandonment. Kindness says, I care about your feelings. Self-abandonment says, your feelings matter more than mine. Kindness creates connection. Self-abandonment creates resentment. Kindness allows honesty. Self-abandonment requires pretending. The tragedy is that many people cannot even recognize when they are abandoning themselves, because they learn to do it so early in life. Maybe you grew up in an environment where expressing your needs caused problems. Perhaps you learned that speaking honestly led to criticism. Maybe your emotions were dismissed. Maybe you were called difficult for having boundaries. Maybe you were praised for being the easy child, the strong child, the responsible child, the child who never asked for much. Slowly, you learned an important lesson. If I want love, I must become convenient. If I want people to stay, I cannot upset them. If I want acceptance, I must hide the parts of myself that others dislike. So you adapted. You became what everyone needed. You became the helper, the listener, the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who checks on everyone else, the one who remembers birthdays, the one who notices when someone is hurting, the one people rely on. But somewhere along the way, you forgot to ask yourself a simple question. Who is taking care of me? Who notices when I'm struggling? Who asks what I need? Who listens when my heart is tired? And perhaps the answer has often been no one, because you became so skilled at carrying everyone else's burdens that people assumed you didn't have any of your own. You became the safe place for others, while secretly wishing someone would become that safe place for you. But instead of asking for help, you kept giving. Instead of resting, you kept proving your worth. Instead of honoring your limits, you pushed yourself further. Because deep inside, there was a fear you rarely spoke out loud. What if they leave if I stop being useful? What if they stop loving me if I disappoint them? What if setting boundaries makes me selfish? What if choosing myself means losing everyone? So you continued abandoning yourself, not because you hated yourself, but because you were afraid that authenticity would lead to rejection, afraid that honesty would lead to abandonment, afraid that if people saw the real you, they would decide you were too difficult to love. The Buddha understood this fear. He understood how attachment causes us to cling to approval, how the mind convinces us that our survival depends on being accepted. But he also taught that suffering begins when we resist truth. And the truth is this: no relationship built upon self-betrayal can bring lasting peace. Think about that. How can someone truly love you if they only know the version of you that constantly sacrifices themselves? How can you feel seen if you never allow yourself to be known? How can you experience genuine connection if your entire relationship depends on pretending? Many people spend years wondering why they feel lonely even when surrounded by others. This is often why. Because people may love the version of you that always says yes, while the real you remains hidden, unheard, unseen, untouched. And there is a grief that comes with realizing this. The grief of understanding how many times you abandoned your own heart, how many dreams you put aside, how many tears you swallowed, how many boundaries you ignored, how many times your intuition whispered, "This isn't right," and you silenced it because you didn't want to lose someone. Maybe you stayed too long. Maybe you tolerated too much. Maybe you accepted less than you deserved. Maybe you convinced yourself that crumbs were enough because you feared having nothing at all. If that's true, be gentle with yourself. You were trying to protect yourself the only way you knew how. You were searching for love. You were trying to belong. You were doing what you believed was necessary to survive emotionally. But survival is not the same as living, and eventually, there comes a moment when your soul becomes too tired to continue betraying itself. You begin noticing the resentment, the exhaustion, the quiet sadness. You realize that being everything for everyone has left you disconnected from yourself. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you begin asking different questions. What do I actually want? What do I truly need? What do I genuinely feel? What am I pretending not to notice? Where have I been saying yes when my heart is screaming no? These questions are uncomfortable because awakening often is. Returning to yourself means disappointing people who benefited from your self-abandonment. It means setting boundaries. It means speaking honestly. It means risking disapproval. It means understanding that some people only loved your compliance, not your authenticity. And that realization hurts. But losing relationships built upon the abandonment of your true self is not failure. It is freedom, because real love does not require your disappearance. Real friendship does not demand your exhaustion. Real connection does not punish honesty. The people meant for your life may not always agree with you, but they will not require you to betray yourself in order to belong. The Buddha taught the middle way, a path between extremes, not selfishness, not self-sacrifice, but balance, a way of living where compassion includes you too, where your needs matter, where your feelings deserve attention, where your inner peace becomes sacred. Choosing yourself does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you stop loving. It simply means that your love for others no longer comes at the cost of your relationship with yourself. You stop abandoning your own heart just to keep someone else's approval. You stop shrinking to fit inside spaces you have already outgrown. You stop apologizing for having needs. You stop treating yourself as if you are the least important person in your own life. And perhaps this is the healing your soul has been waiting for. Not another person, not another chance to prove your worth, but permission. Permission to choose yourself. Permission to trust what you feel. Permission to rest. Permission to speak your truth. Permission to protect your peace. Permission to believe that you are worthy of love without earning it through exhaustion. Maybe for years you have been asking, why do people keep leaving me? But tonight, there is another question worth asking. How many times have I left myself behind just to keep others close? Do not ask this question with shame. Ask it with compassion, because awareness is where healing begins. And maybe the greatest act of self-love is not convincing everyone else to stay. Maybe it is finally becoming the person who refuses to abandon you, the person who listens when you are hurting, the person who protects your peace, the person who honors your truth, the person who stays because people may come and go throughout your life. Some will misunderstand you, some will disappoint you, some will leave. But the relationship that shapes every moment of your existence is the one you have with yourself. And perhaps true healing begins the moment you stop asking, what must I sacrifice so people won't leave? And start asking, what would happen if, for once, I chose not to leave myself? Because the day you stop abandoning yourself to keep others is the day you finally discover what love was always meant to feel like. Not exhausting, not fearful, not earned through self-erasure, but peaceful, honest, steady, and free. And from that day forward, no matter who enters your life or who walks away, you will always have one person who remains faithful to your heart. You. And that changes everything. No amount of validation can fill an empty self. There is a hunger that many people carry without ever talking about it. It is not hunger for food. It is not hunger for money. It is not even hunger for success. It is the hunger to feel enough. The hunger to be seen, to be admired, to be chosen, to be reassured, to hear someone say, you matter, you are doing well, I'm proud of you, I would never leave you. And if we're honest, almost all of us know this hunger, because deep inside, there is a part of us that longs to be recognized, a part that wants confirmation that we are valuable, that we are lovable, that we are worthy of taking up space in this world. The desire itself is not wrong. The Buddha never taught that appreciation is bad. Human beings naturally enjoy being loved. A kind word can warm the heart. A compliment can brighten the day. Being acknowledged can bring comfort. The problem begins when validation becomes our emotional oxygen, when we no longer enjoy approval but depend on it, when we no longer appreciate praise but require it in order to feel okay. Because the moment your worth depends on external validation, you hand your inner peace over to the world, and the world is inconsistent. Some days people applaud you, some days they ignore you, some days they celebrate you, some days they criticize you, some days they understand your intentions, some days they misunderstand everything. If your identity is built upon their reactions, then your emotional life becomes a roller coaster. You rise when people approve. You collapse when they don't. You begin living from the outside in, and slowly, without realizing it, you lose touch with your own voice. Maybe you've experienced this. Maybe you post something online and immediately check who liked it, who commented, who noticed, who didn't. Maybe you accomplish something meaningful, but instead of asking yourself how you feel, you wait to see how others respond. Maybe you work harder than everyone around you, yet still feel empty because no one acknowledged your efforts. Maybe someone compliments you and you feel good for a few moments, but by the next day, the feeling disappears, and once again you find yourself searching, needing another compliment, another achievement, another sign that you matter. It becomes endless, because validation can soothe insecurity temporarily, but it cannot heal it. Imagine trying to fill a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. You keep pouring more water into it, more praise, more success, more followers, more attention, more achievements, more approval. But no matter how much you pour in, the bucket never stays full, because the problem was never a lack of water. The problem was the hole. And for many people, that hole is the belief, I am not enough unless someone else confirms that I am. This belief often begins early in life. Perhaps you were only praised when you performed well. Perhaps affection was tied to achievement. Maybe your mistakes were criticized more than your efforts were appreciated. Maybe you learned that being exceptional was the only way to feel loved. So you became an achiever. You became the person who constantly pushed themselves. The person who could never rest, because rest felt undeserved. Because deep down, you believed, if I stop achieving, people will stop valuing me. If I disappoint others, I lose my worth. If I fail, I lose my identity. So you kept climbing, one goal after another, one accomplishment after another, one victory after another. Yet each achievement only satisfied you for a short while. Soon, the familiar emptiness returned, and the mind whispered, it's still not enough. So you chased more, not realizing that no amount of external success can repair an internal wound. The Buddha taught that craving creates suffering, not because desire itself is evil, but because the mind believes, once I get this, then I will finally be complete. Once I receive enough praise, then I'll be enough. Once enough people admire me, then I'll be enough. Once this person chooses me, then I'll be enough. Once everyone approves of me, then I'll be enough. But enough never arrives. Because the destination keeps moving, the ego always asks for more proof, more reassurance, more certainty. And eventually you become exhausted because you are trying to satisfy an inner emptiness using things that were never designed to fill it. You become addicted to being needed, addicted to being praised, addicted to being admired, addicted to hearing that you are special, not because you are selfish, but because you are starving for the acceptance you have not learned to give yourself. And perhaps this explains why criticism hurts so much, why rejection feels unbearable, why being ignored can ruin your entire day. Because when your worth depends on external approval, disagreement feels like destruction. Someone's opinion becomes a verdict on your value. Someone's rejection becomes evidence against your lovability. Someone's criticism becomes proof that you are flawed beyond repair. But what if none of these things determine who you are? What if another person's inability to appreciate you says more about their perspective than your worth? The Buddha often invited people to observe the mind, to notice how quickly it attaches meaning to everything. One person doesn't reply, I must not matter. Someone disagrees with you, I must be wrong. Someone chooses another path. I must not be enough. But are these facts, or are they stories the wounded mind creates? You can be extraordinary and still be misunderstood. You can be kind and still be criticized. You can love deeply and still not be chosen. None of these experiences remove your inherent worth. A diamond remains valuable whether someone recognizes its value or not. The moon remains beautiful even when hidden behind clouds, and you remain worthy even when others fail to acknowledge your light. True healing begins when you stop asking the world to decide how you should feel about yourself, when you stop collecting approval like medicine, when you stop waiting for permission to believe in your own goodness, because there will never come a day when everyone approves of you. There will always be people who misunderstand you, people who dislike you, people who cannot see your heart. And if your peace depends on changing their minds, peace will always remain out of reach. The deepest confidence is not believing that everyone will love you. The deepest confidence is knowing that you do not need everyone to. It is waking up each morning and asking, did I live according to my values? Was I honest? Was I compassionate? Did I honor myself? And if the answer is yes, allowing that to be enough. Imagine how free you would become if you no longer needed constant reassurance. Imagine creating because you love it, not because you need applause. Imagine helping others without needing recognition. Imagine resting without guilt. Imagine existing without trying to earn the right to exist. Imagine looking in the mirror and saying, I don't need to prove my worth today. I don't need to perform for love. I don't need to exhaust myself chasing approval. I am already enough. This is not arrogance. It is peace. It is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are beyond praise and criticism. It is understanding that compliments are beautiful, but not necessary. Recognition is meaningful, but not essential. Validation is pleasant, but not your source. Because your source no longer lives in the changing opinions of others. It lives within you. Perhaps for most of your life, you have been standing outside yourself with an empty bowl in your hands, asking the world, please tell me that I matter. Please tell me I'm worthy. Please tell me I'm enough. But maybe tonight is different. Maybe tonight, you gently place that bowl down. Maybe tonight, you stop begging strangers to give you what only you can truly cultivate. And maybe, for the first time, you become the voice your heart has always needed to hear. The voice that says, you do not have to earn your value. You do not have to perform for love. You do not have to prove that you deserve to be here. You were worthy before anyone applauded you. You were worthy when they ignored you. You were worthy when they left, and you are worthy now, because no amount of validation can fill an empty self. But the moment you begin accepting yourself, honoring yourself, and loving yourself without conditions, the hunger that has followed you for years slowly begins to fade, and in its place, something beautiful appears. Not the excitement of being admired, not the temporary high of approval, but something far more powerful. A quiet, steady knowing, a peace that no rejection can steal, a confidence that no criticism can destroy, the unshakable realization that your worth was never in question. You simply forgot where to look for it, and now you are finally remembering. The compassion you give others must return to you. There is a strange sadness that lives inside many kind people. They know exactly how to comfort others. They know what words to say when someone is grieving. They know how to sit beside a friend who is falling apart. They know how to encourage, how to forgive, how to understand, how to be patient, how to see the pain hidden behind someone's anger, how to recognize the wounds beneath another person's mistakes. They offer warmth so naturally that people often describe them as safe, as gentle, as compassionate, as the person everyone turns to when life becomes too heavy. And maybe that person is you. Maybe you are the one people call when they need advice, the one who remembers everyone else's struggles, the one who checks in, the one who says, don't be so hard on yourself. You did the best you could. It's okay to make mistakes. You deserve kindness too. But something changes when the suffering belongs to you, Suddenly the compassion disappears, the patience vanishes, the understanding you so freely give to others becomes impossible to offer yourself. You miss one deadline, and you call yourself lazy. You make one mistake, and you call yourself a failure. You struggle emotionally, and you accuse yourself of being weak. You need rest, and you label yourself unproductive. You cry, and then apologize for having feelings. You compare your healing to everyone else's timeline. You expect yourself to recover faster, do better, know better, be stronger, carry more, need less. And somehow, the person you treat with the least amount of tenderness is often yourself. Think about that for a moment. Imagine speaking to someone you deeply love the same way you speak to yourself. Imagine a friend comes to you and says, "I'm exhausted." Would you respond by saying, "You're pathetic. You should be doing more. Why can't you get your life together? Other people have it worse. You don't deserve to rest." Of course not. You would offer understanding. You would say, "You've been carrying a lot. You need time. You don't have to do everything perfectly. You deserve care too." You would remind them that being human is difficult. So why is it so hard to offer that same grace to yourself? Why do you become your own harshest critic? For many people, self-criticism feels normal, even necessary. They believe that being hard on themselves keeps them disciplined, keeps them improving, keeps them from becoming complacent. They fear that self-compassion will make them lazy, selfish, weak. But the Buddha taught something radically different. He taught compassion not as a reward for perfection, but as a response to suffering. And he never excluded you from that teaching. You are included. Your pain matters. Your exhaustion matters. Your fears matter. Your healing matters. Yet many of us have built identities around taking care of everyone else. We become so focused on being needed that we forget we have needs too. We know how to pour, but we never learned how to receive. We know how to save, but we never learned how to soften. We know how to keep going, but we never learned how to rest. Perhaps somewhere along the way, you received the message that love had to be earned through sacrifice. That being a good person meant always putting yourself last, that your worth depended on how much you gave. So you became selfless, but not in a healthy way. You ignored your limits, ignored your emotions, ignored your body, ignored your spirit. You gave and gave and gave until compassion became exhaustion, until kindness became resentment, until generosity became depletion. Because compassion without self-compassion eventually becomes unsustainable. You cannot endlessly pour from an empty cup. Eventually, even the strongest heart becomes tired. The Buddha often spoke of loving kindness, a boundless quality of the heart that wishes freedom from suffering. But notice something important. He did not say this kindness should only flow outward. He taught people to direct loving kindness toward themselves as well. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be free from suffering. At first, many people struggle with these words because deep down, they do not believe they deserve them. They can wish happiness for strangers, yet feel uncomfortable wishing happiness for themselves. Why? Because part of them still believes love must be earned, that they have not done enough, achieved enough, healed enough, become enough. But compassion does not ask whether you deserve it. Compassion recognizes that suffering exists, and suffering deserves tenderness, even your own, especially your own. Think about how much pain you have survived, the disappointments no one fully understood, the nights you cried quietly, the times you held yourself together while falling apart inside, the losses you never spoke about, the fears you carried alone, the heartbreaks that changed you, the expectations you struggled to meet. You have been through so much, and still you wake up. Still you try. Still you keep searching for healing. Doesn't that version of you deserve understanding? Doesn't that version of you deserve kindness? What would happen if you stopped speaking to yourself as if you were an enemy? What if, instead of saying, "What's wrong with me?" you asked, "What happened to me?" What if, instead of saying, "I should be over this by now," you said, "Healing takes time"? What if, Instead of punishing yourself for struggling, you recognize the courage it takes simply to continue. Self-compassion does not remove responsibility. It simply removes cruelty. It says, I can acknowledge my mistakes without hating myself. I can grow without shaming myself. I can learn without attacking myself. I can be imperfect and still worthy of love. This changes everything, because growth rooted in self-hatred eventually collapses. But growth rooted in compassion becomes sustainable. You begin making choices because you care about yourself, not because you despise yourself. You rest because your body deserves care. You set boundaries because your peace matters. You leave harmful situations because your heart deserves protection. You nourish yourself because your life has value, not because you finally earned love, but because you realize love was never meant to be withheld from you. Perhaps the greatest tragedy is not that people failed to be compassionate toward you. Perhaps it is that you inherited their voices and continued their work inside your own mind. But that cycle can end with you. You can choose differently. You can become the gentle voice you needed when you were younger, the reassuring voice, the patient voice, the understanding voice, the voice that says, you are trying, you are learning, you are allowed to rest, you are allowed to make mistakes, you are allowed to be human. You do not have to earn your right to exist. Imagine how your life would change if you became a safe place for yourself. If, during moments of failure, you responded with curiosity instead of condemnation. If, during moments of fear, you responded with comfort instead of criticism. If, during moments of weakness, you offered yourself the same compassion you have always offered everyone else. Because at the end of the day, you cannot hate yourself into healing. You cannot shame yourself into peace. You cannot bully yourself into wholeness. The path of awakening is not built through self-punishment. It is built through awareness, honesty, and love. And maybe tonight, after years of carrying everyone else's pain, after years of being strong, after years of extending compassion outward while starving inward, you can place your hand over your own heart and finally ask, what if I deserve the same kindness I give so freely to others? Not because you are perfect, not because you have everything figured out, not because you have earned it, but because you are human. You suffer, you hope, you break, you heal, you fall, you rise again, and that alone makes you worthy of compassion. Perhaps this is the lesson your soul has been waiting to hear. The compassion you give others was never meant to stop at you. It was always meant to return home. And maybe true healing begins the moment you stop treating yourself as someone who must earn love and start embracing yourself as someone who has always deserved it. Not someday, not when you finally improve, not when you become who you think you should be, but here, now, exactly as you are, because you too are worthy of the gentleness you offer the world. And perhaps the most beautiful act of love is finally allowing some of that love to stay with you. Solitude becomes sacred when you stop fearing yourself. For many people, being alone feels unbearable. The silence becomes too loud. The empty room feels too heavy. The absence of messages feels like rejection. A quiet evening feels like proof that something is missing, and so they keep themselves surrounded by noise. They turn on the television the moment they wake up. They scroll endlessly through social media. They answer every notification immediately. They stay busy. They stay distracted. They move from one conversation to another, one relationship to another, one source of stimulation to another, not always because they enjoy it, but because they are terrified of what they might hear in the silence. Because when the world finally becomes quiet, they are left alone with themselves. And for many people, that is the thing they fear most. Perhaps you understand this fear. Maybe you have stayed in relationships long after they stopped bringing you peace, simply because being alone seemed worse. Maybe you've returned to people who repeatedly hurt you because the emptiness after they left felt unbearable. Maybe you've tolerated loneliness inside unhealthy relationships because at least someone was there. Maybe you've kept yourself constantly occupied because slowing down means feeling everything you've been trying to outrun. You tell yourself you miss them. But sometimes what you truly fear is meeting yourself without distractions. The Buddha understood this deeply. He spent years observing the human mind, and he noticed that most suffering does not come from being alone. It comes from our resistance to being alone. We have been taught to fear solitude. The world often treats it as something shameful. If you are alone for too long, people ask, "Why haven't you found someone yet? If you're happy alone, what's wrong with you? When are you finally going to settle down?" As if being alone is a problem to solve. As if your value increases when someone chooses you. As if companionship is proof of success and solitude is proof of failure. But the Buddha offered another perspective. He understood that solitude is not emptiness. Solitude is space. Space to hear your own thoughts. Space to understand your own heart. Space to discover who you are beneath the roles you've been performing for everyone else. The truth is, there is a profound difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness says, "I am alone because no one wants me." Solitude says, "I am alone and I am learning to know myself." Loneliness feels like rejection. Solitude becomes remembrance. Loneliness whispers, "You are unwanted." Solitude gently asks, "You other fider fosh." What parts of yourself have you forgotten? Many people spend their entire lives avoiding this question because meeting yourself honestly requires courage. When the distractions disappear, unresolved pain often rises to the surface. The grief you never processed, the heartbreak you never fully healed from, the dreams you abandoned, the resentment you buried, the fears you pretended not to have, the loneliness you covered with busyness. Suddenly you hear the voice inside your mind, the one you've spent years trying to silence. And perhaps this is why solitude feels uncomfortable at first. Not because being alone is dangerous, but because being honest is. You begin noticing how harshly you speak to yourself, how quickly you judge yourself, how uncomfortable you are in your own presence. You realize that although you've spent your entire life with yourself, you've never truly learned how to befriend yourself. Imagine meeting a stranger who criticized everything you did, who constantly reminded you of your failures, who replayed your mistakes, who questioned your worth, who compared you to everyone else. Would you enjoy spending time with them? Probably not. Yet many people carry this voice inside their own minds every single day. Then wonder why solitude feels painful. But solitude itself is not the problem. The relationship you have with yourself is. This is why solitude can become sacred. Because it reveals the truth. It shows you where healing is needed. It exposes the parts of you that have been neglected. It invites you to stop running. At first, you may sit alone and feel restless. You may reach for your phone every few minutes. You may crave distraction. You may replay old conversations. You may imagine people returning. You may wonder if you should message the person you promised yourself you had moved on from. You may feel uncomfortable, anxious, impatient. That is natural, because for years, perhaps decades, you've trained yourself to escape your own company. But if you remain, something beautiful begins to happen. The silence softens. The restlessness settles. You start noticing small things. The sound of rain outside your window, the warmth of a cup of tea in your hands, the rhythm of your breathing, the way sunlight moves across the room, the peace hidden inside ordinary moments. You begin listening to your own thoughts with curiosity rather than fear. You begin asking yourself questions you've ignored for years. What truly matters to me? What brings me joy? What drains my energy? What dreams have I neglected? What do I genuinely need? Who am I when I am not trying to impress anyone? Without realizing it, you begin rebuilding the relationship you've been missing all along. The relationship with yourself. You discover that you have opinions worth hearing, needs worth honoring, dreams worth pursuing, pain worth acknowledging. You begin becoming your own companion, your own witness, your own safe place. And this changes everything. Because when you no longer fear being alone, you stop settling. You stop choosing people simply because they fill empty space. You stop clinging to relationships that diminish your spirit. You stop begging for crumbs of affection because silence no longer terrifies you. You realize that peace is better than pretending. Solitude is better than self-betrayal, and being alone is far better than abandoning yourself just to avoid it. The Buddha taught that everything you seek can be discovered within awareness itself, not because you no longer need others, but because you stop demanding that others rescue you from yourself. You can still desire companionship. You can still deeply love. You can still build meaningful relationships. But those relationships become healthier because they are built from choice rather than desperation. You no longer say, "I need someone so I can be okay." Instead, you say, "I am okay, and I choose to share my life with others." That shift changes the quality of every connection you have, because people stop becoming medicine for your loneliness. They become companions on your journey. Perhaps the greatest irony is this: the very thing you fear may become the place where you finally heal. The silence you avoid may carry the wisdom you need. The solitude you resist may reveal the love you've been searching for. Because when you stop fearing your own company, you stop fearing life. You realize that no matter who enters your world or who leaves it, you remain. You survive heartbreak. You survive disappointment. You survive endings, because your sense of home no longer depends entirely on another person's presence. It lives within you, and maybe tonight, instead of reaching for another distraction, instead of rushing to fill every empty space, instead of treating solitude like an enemy, you can sit quietly with yourself for just a few moments, without judgment, without trying to fix anything, without trying to escape, simply noticing, listening, breathing, being, and perhaps, for the first time in a very long time, you'll discover that you are not someone to be feared. You are not too much. You are not a burden. You are not empty. You are a human being worthy of your own presence, a soul deserving of your own attention, a heart waiting patiently to be known. Because solitude is not the absence of love. It is the place where love learns to return home. And maybe the greatest freedom in life is not finding someone who promises they will never leave. Maybe it is becoming so deeply rooted within yourself that even when the world changes, even when people come and go, even when seasons of life rise and fall, you remain connected to the one person who has been with you through every chapter of your existence. You. And from that sacred relationship, a quieter kind of happiness begins to grow. Not loud, not dramatic, not dependent on constant reassurance, but steady, gentle, unshakable. The peace of finally realizing that your own presence has never been something to escape. It has always been a place to come home to. The cruel voice in your mind is not who you are. There is a voice inside your mind that has been speaking to you for years. You know this voice. It comments on everything you do. It judges your appearance, questions your decisions, reminds you of your mistakes, compares your life to everyone else's. It appears when you look in the mirror, when you make a mistake, when someone rejects you, when you fail, when you are alone at night, and sometimes it speaks so often that you no longer notice it. You simply assume that it is telling the truth. Maybe it says things like, "You're not good enough. You always ruin everything. No one will ever truly love you. You're too broken. You should have done better. You're falling behind. Look at everyone else. Why can't you be more like them? You'll never change. You don't deserve happiness." At first, these thoughts may seem small, just passing comments, but repeated often enough, they become beliefs, and beliefs shape the way we experience life. The frightening part is this: many people never question this voice. They obey it. They build their identity around it. They mistake it for wisdom. They think, if I hear it in my mind, it must be true. But the Buddha invited people to ask a very different question: who is listening to the voice? Because the voice itself is not the whole of who you are. The fact that you can hear your thoughts means there is an awareness beyond them. There is a part of you capable of noticing, observing, witnessing, and that part of you is far quieter than the inner critic. But it is also far wiser. Think about this carefully. If you say, "I notice that I'm having the thought that I'm not enough," who is doing the noticing? The thought says, "You are a failure." But another part of you is aware of the thought. The thought says, "You are unlovable. Yet another part of you witnesses it appearing and disappearing. The Buddha taught that suffering increases when we identify completely with the movements of the mind, because the mind produces thousands of thoughts every day, some helpful, some fearful, some compassionate, some cruel. If every thought were true, reality itself would constantly change. One moment you are extraordinary, the next moment worthless. One moment hopeful, the next moment doomed. Thoughts are experiences. They are not always facts. Yet for many people, the inner critic becomes the loudest authority in their lives. And often, this voice did not begin with them. Maybe it sounds like a parent who expected perfection, a teacher who embarrassed you, a partner who made you feel small, a bully who mocked your differences, a society that constantly told you who you should become. Perhaps you heard criticism so often that eventually you memorized it, you carried it into adulthood, and now, without realizing it, you continue speaking to yourself in voices that were never truly yours. You make one mistake and think, "Of course I messed it up." You feel emotional and think, "I'm too sensitive." You struggle and think, "I'm weak." You rest and think, "I'm lazy." You ask for what you need and think, "I'm selfish." You begin believing that self-punishment is necessary. That harshness creates improvement. That shame will motivate you to become better. But look honestly at your own life. Has cruelty ever brought you peace? Has self-hatred ever made healing easier? Has humiliation ever helped you grow in a healthy way? Or has it only made you more anxious, more fearful, more disconnected from yourself? Imagine carrying a wounded child through a storm. Would screaming at that child help them feel safe? Would insulting them help them walk more confidently? Would reminding them of every mistake teach them how to trust themselves? Of course not. You would protect them, encourage them, guide them patiently. The wounded parts inside you deserve the same tenderness. The Buddha never taught people to hate themselves into awakening. He taught awareness, compassion, understanding. He taught that freedom begins when we stop blindly obeying every thought that enters the mind. Imagine sitting beside a river. Leaves float by on the surface. Some leaves are beautiful, some are damaged, some are large, some are small, but you do not chase each one. You simply watch them pass. Thoughts are like those leaves. One thought says, "You'll never heal." Another says, "You've survived difficult things before." One says, "No one cares about you." Another says, "You are loved more than you realize." One says, "You're falling behind." Another whispers, "There is no race." You do not have to jump into the river and be carried away by every thought that appears. You can simply notice, observe, allow, release. This does not mean ignoring difficult emotions. It means recognizing that your mind tells stories, and not every story deserves your trust. How many opportunities have you avoided because of the voice? How many dreams have you abandoned? How many conversations have you replayed? How many nights have you spent awake because your own thoughts refused to let you rest? How much suffering has come not from reality itself, but from the relentless commentary inside your head? And what if you stop treating that commentary as absolute truth? What if, the next time the voice says, "You're not enough," you pause and ask, "Is that true, or is that fear speaking?" What if, when the voice says, "Everyone is judging you," you ask, "Do I know that for certain?" What if, when it says, "You'll never change," you remember all the ways you already have? Awareness creates space, and within that space, freedom becomes possible. You begin choosing which thoughts deserve your attention. You stop automatically believing the cruelest version of every story. You become less reactive, less afraid, less controlled by mental habits formed long ago, and slowly, another voice begins to emerge, a quieter voice, one you may have ignored for years. It does not shout, it does not shame, it does not compare. It simply reminds you, you are learning, you are growing, you are allowed to make mistakes, you are trying your best. You do not have to be perfect to deserve love. This voice is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the voice of awareness, the voice of compassion, the voice that sees your humanity clearly. Many people spend their entire lives at war with themselves, fighting their minds, punishing their hearts, trying to earn their own acceptance. But perhaps peace begins when the war ends, when you stop trying to destroy the parts of yourself that hurt, when you stop arguing with every fearful thought, when you stop treating your mind like an enemy. Because healing is not becoming someone who never has negative thoughts. Healing is learning that negative thoughts do not define you. You are not your fear. You are not your shame. You are not your anxiety. You are not your worst moment. You are not the voice that tells you that you are unworthy. You are the awareness that notices it, the presence that remains, the consciousness beneath the noise, the stillness beneath the storm. And perhaps that is why meditation was never about silencing the mind completely. It was about changing your relationship with it, learning to sit with your thoughts without becoming them, learning to witness without judgment, learning to return again and again to the quiet center within yourself. Maybe for years you have listened to the cruelest voice in your mind as if it were the voice of truth. Maybe you believed every accusation, every criticism, every fearful prediction. But tonight I want you to consider another possibility. What if that voice was never your identity? What if it was only pain trying to protect you? What if it was only fear repeating old lessons? What if it was simply noise mistaken for wisdom? And what if, beneath all of that noise, beneath the criticism, beneath the doubt, beneath the endless stories about who you should be, there has always been another part of you waiting patiently to be heard? A part that knows your worth cannot be measured by perfection. A part that understands your mistakes do not erase your goodness. A part that sees your wounds and still chooses love. Because the cruel voice in your mind is not who you are. It is only a voice. And voices can be questioned. Voices can be softened. Voices can lose their power. But the awareness beneath them, the quiet presence that has been with you through every heartbreak, every failure, every triumph, and every beginning, that presence remains untouched. And maybe true freedom begins the moment you stop asking, how do I silence this voice forever? And start asking, why have I trusted it for so long? Because you do not need to become someone new. You only need to remember who you are beneath the noise. And beneath the noise, you may discover something extraordinary. Not a person who is broken, not a person who is unworthy, but a human being who has always deserved the love, patience, and compassion they have spent their entire life trying to earn. A human being who was never the voice in their head. A human being who was always so much more. Stop chasing those who refuse to choose you. One of the most heartbreaking things a person can do is spend years trying to convince someone to love them. Trying harder, giving more, waiting longer, becoming smaller, hoping that one day, if they are patient enough, kind enough, understanding enough, sacrificial enough, the other person will finally see their worth. Maybe you know what this feels like. Maybe you've waited for messages that never came, replayed conversations in your mind, searching for hidden meaning, made excuses for someone's inconsistency, ignored the way your heart tightened every time they disappointed you, told yourself, they're just confused, they've been hurt before. They don't mean to treat me this way. They'll change. If I love them enough, they'll finally choose me. And so you stayed. You gave second chances, then third chances, then 10th chances. You lowered your standards. You silenced your intuition. You accepted less than what your heart truly needed. Not because you lacked wisdom, but because you feared what would happen if you stopped hoping. Because hope can be intoxicating, especially when mixed with loneliness, especially when mixed with attachment, especially when mixed with the deep human desire to be chosen. There is something within many of us that believes, if this person finally loves me, it will prove that I am worthy. If they choose me, all of my doubts about myself will disappear. If I can make them stay, maybe I will finally feel enough. And without realizing it, the relationship stops being about love. It becomes about validation. It becomes a mission, a test. Eunosis untest, a desperate attempt to heal old wounds through another person's approval. The Buddha understood how dangerous this attachment can become, because attachment does not see clearly. Attachment sees potential and ignores reality. Attachment remembers the occasional moments of affection while overlooking repeated patterns of pain. Attachment says, but what if they change? But what if this time is different? But what if I just try harder? And so we chase people who have already shown us who they are. We run after those who continuously walk away. We beg for attention from those who give it reluctantly. We settle for inconsistency and call it complicated love. We accept emotional crumbs and convince ourselves we should be grateful. We wait months, sometimes years, for someone to offer us the bare minimum, and all the while, our own hearts grow tired. Think about how exhausting this becomes, constantly wondering where you stand, overanalyzing every message, feeling anxious when they pull away, relieved when they return, terrified of saying the wrong thing, afraid of asking for too much, walking on eggshells, trying to become more lovable, more attractive, less emotional, less needy, more understanding, more patient, more forgiving, as if changing yourself enough will finally inspire someone to give you the love they have been withholding. But there is a painful truth that many people spend years avoiding. You cannot convince someone to value what they are unwilling to value. You cannot force another person to recognize your worth. You cannot earn consistency through self-sacrifice. You cannot love someone into becoming who they refuse to be. And perhaps the hardest truth of all is this: some people know exactly what you offer. They know your loyalty, your kindness, your patience, your depth, your willingness to stay, and they still choose not to meet you there. Not because you are unworthy, but because they either cannot or will not. The Buddha taught that suffering often begins when we resist reality. Reality says, they keep disappointing you. They keep breaking promises. They keep choosing other priorities. They keep showing you their limitations. But attachment whispers, maybe if I wait a little longer, maybe if I love harder, maybe if I prove myself. And in that space between reality and fantasy, we lose years of our lives. Perhaps what hurts most is not losing them. Perhaps what hurts most is grieving the future you imagined, the version of them you believed they could become, the relationship you hoped they would give you, the life you built inside your mind. You weren't only attached to who they were, you were attached to who you thought they would eventually be. And letting go means mourning that dream. It means accepting that potential is not reality. It means understanding that love cannot thrive on promises alone. Love requires presence, effort, consistency, mutual choice. Because real love does not make you beg for basic respect. Real love does not leave you constantly confused. Real love does not require you to shrink your needs until they disappear. Real love does not punish honesty. Real love does not make you question whether you deserve to exist in someone's heart. Real love chooses, again and again, not perfectly, but intentionally. Perhaps you have spent so much of your life trying to be chosen by others that you forgot something important. You also have a choice. You can choose not to chase. You can choose not to wait forever. You can choose not to sacrifice your peace at the altar of someone else's indecision. You can choose not to confuse longing with love. You can choose yourself. At first, this feels terrifying because chasing gives the illusion of control. As long as you keep trying, hope stays alive. As long as you keep waiting, you don't have to grieve. As long as you keep reaching out, you don't have to accept what is. But eventually, the soul becomes exhausted. There comes a moment when your heart quietly whispers, I can't keep abandoning myself like this. A moment when you realize that fighting to be chosen by someone else has cost you your relationship with yourself. And maybe that is the invitation hidden within heartbreak, not to become bitter, not to close your heart, but to redirect your love, to stop pouring endless energy into those who repeatedly refuse to hold it with care, and begin offering some of that devotion to yourself. Imagine what would happen if you stopped chasing unavailable people. How much energy would return to you? How much peace would enter your life? How many dreams would you finally pursue? How much laughter would you rediscover? how much of yourself would you reclaim? You would no longer wake up wondering if someone else sees your value, because your worth would no longer depend on their recognition. You would no longer confuse attention with love, or inconsistency with passion, or anxiety with chemistry. You would begin choosing relationships that feel safe instead of addictive, steady instead of chaotic, mutual instead of one-sided, because maturity in love is not finding someone who never disappoints you. It is learning not to abandon yourself in order to keep someone who repeatedly does. The Buddha never taught people to stop loving. He taught them to stop clinging, to release what causes unnecessary suffering, to trust reality more than fantasy, to understand that peace often arrives disguised as letting go. And perhaps tonight, there is someone you need to stop chasing. Maybe it is a former partner. Maybe it is a friend. Maybe it is a parent who never gave you what you needed. Affairs, maybe it is a version of yourself that keeps believing love must be earned through suffering. Whoever it is, ask yourself honestly, how much of my life have I spent trying to convince someone to choose me? How much of myself have I sacrificed in the process? How many times have I mistaken waiting for love? Because the truth is this, you should never have to beg for what flows naturally. You should never have to audition for a place in someone's life. You should never have to prove that your heart deserves gentleness. The people meant for your life will still require effort. They will still make mistakes. They will still be imperfect, but they will not make you chase endlessly for the privilege of being loved. They will meet you halfway. They will communicate. They will choose, and perhaps the greatest act of self-love is not convincing someone else to stay. Perhaps it is having the courage to walk away from what continually wounds you, to trust that being alone is better than being repeatedly abandoned in the presence of another, to believe that peace is more valuable than possibility, and to finally say, I release the need to be chosen by those who cannot choose me. I stop fighting for scraps of affection. I stop bargaining with my worth. I stop chasing what keeps running. I choose myself. Because the moment you stop chasing those who refuse to choose you, you stop proving your value to the wrong people. You stop begging for love that costs your dignity. You stop confusing suffering with devotion, and little by little, you begin returning home, back to your peace, back to your truth, back to the part of yourself that always knew this. The right people will never require you to lose yourself in order to keep them, and the love you deserve will never ask you to spend your life chasing after it. It will recognize you, meet you, choose you, just as you are. But until that day comes, may you become brave enough to offer yourself the one thing you have been seeking from everyone else, the unwavering choice to stay. The way you love yourself shapes every relationship. Whether you realize it or not, the relationship you have with yourself becomes the blueprint for every other relationship in your life. It shapes what you tolerate, what you expect, what you believe you deserve. It influences who you are drawn to, who you trust, who you stay with, and who you walk away from. Many people spend years trying to understand why the same painful patterns keep repeating, why they continue attracting emotionally unavailable people, why they overgive until they become exhausted, why they feel unseen, unheard, or unappreciated, why they keep finding themselves in relationships where they lose their voice. They wonder, why does this keep happening to me? But sometimes the deeper question is this: what is my relationship with myself teaching me to accept? Because the love you have for yourself is not measured by positive affirmations. It is measured by the choices you make every single day. Do you listen when your body asks for rest? Or do you push through exhaustion because you believe your value depends on productivity? Do you honor your boundaries? Or do you betray them to avoid disappointing others? Do you speak kindly to yourself after mistakes? Or do you attack yourself with words you would never use towards someone you love? Do you trust your intuition? Or do you constantly doubt what you already know to be true? The answers to these questions quietly shape your life, because people learn how to treat you by watching how you treat yourself. If you repeatedly ignore your own needs, others may begin to ignore them too. If you constantly apologize for existing, Others may assume your presence requires apology. If you settle for disrespect from yourself, disrespect from others begins to feel familiar, and familiarity is often mistaken for love. This is one of the reasons unhealthy relationships can feel strangely comfortable, not because they are good for us, but because they mirror the relationship we already have within ourselves. If you constantly criticize yourself, being criticized by others may feel normal. If you abandon yourself, relationships that require self-abandonment may feel familiar. If you believe you must earn love, you may unconsciously choose people who make you work endlessly for it. The Buddha taught that our inner world shapes our experience of the outer world, not because we control everything that happens to us, but because our conditioning influences what we accept, what we seek, and what we believe is possible. Think about someone who genuinely believes they deserve kindness. When someone repeatedly disrespects them, they notice. When their boundaries are violated, they respond. When love becomes harmful, they walk away. Not because they are heartless, but because their relationship with themselves reminds them, this is not how I deserve to be treated. Now think about someone who secretly believes they are difficult to love. When someone gives them crumbs of affection, they cling to them. When someone crosses their boundaries, they excuse it. When someone neglects them, they blame themselves. Because deep down they think, this may be the best I can get. The difference is not worth. Both people are equally worthy of love. The difference is belief, the story they carry about themselves. For years, perhaps you have been trying to fix your relationships without healing the relationship at the center of them all, the relationship with yourself. You searched for people who would finally teach you that you matter. But what if the lesson begins with you? What if loving yourself is not vanity? What if it is responsibility? What if self-love means becoming someone you can trust, keeping promises to yourself, respecting your own limits, listening to your inner wisdom, protecting your peace, choosing honesty over performance? What if self-love means saying, I will no longer abandon myself to keep others comfortable? It sounds simple, but it changes everything. Because when you respect yourself, your standards change. You stop chasing people who repeatedly confuse you. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop mistaking anxiety for chemistry. You stop accepting one-sided relationships as normal. You stop begging to be prioritized. You stop shrinking your needs so others don't leave. You stop believing that love requires suffering. Instead, you begin asking different questions. Do I feel safe here? Can I be honest here? Can I rest here? Can I be fully myself here? Is this relationship helping me grow or teaching me to disappear? These questions emerge naturally when your relationship with yourself becomes stronger. The Buddha encouraged mindful awareness, the ability to observe clearly without illusion. And one of the greatest illusions many people carry is this: if someone else loves me enough, I will finally learn how to love myself. But no one can do that work for you. Another person's affection cannot permanently replace your own acceptance, because eventually, even the healthiest relationship will reveal the places within you that still seek external rescue. No one can reassure you every moment. No one can remove all uncertainty. No one can protect you from every fear. At some point, you must become an active participant in your own healing. You must become someone who says, I will care for my own heart. I will listen to my own needs. I will not betray my own truth. I will not make another person responsible for my entire sense of self. This is not independence rooted in fear. It is interdependence rooted in wholeness. It says, I can love deeply without losing myself. I can receive support without becoming dependent. I can stand beside others without abandoning my own path. Imagine how different your relationships would become if you truly trusted yourself. Imagine knowing that even if someone left, you would survive. Imagine believing that your worth remains intact, even when misunderstood. Imagine choosing relationships from desire rather than desperation. Imagine no longer settling for less because being alone no longer terrifies you. This is what self-love creates, not perfection, not arrogance, but stability. You become less reactive, less fearful, less likely to chase, less willing to betray yourself for approval, more honest, more peaceful, more grounded, because the love you offer yourself becomes the foundation beneath everything else. People will still disappoint you, misunderstand you, leave you. Life will still contain heartbreak. Self-love does not remove pain from the human experience, but it changes how you move through pain. You stop interpreting every rejection as evidence that you are unworthy. You stop collapsing every time someone fails to choose you. You stop losing yourself inside the changing opinions of others, because your identity is no longer built entirely outside of you. It has roots, deep roots, and those roots hold you steady through life's storms. Perhaps this is why the Buddha taught that peace begins within, not because relationships don't matter, but because the quality of every relationship is influenced by the one you carry inside yourself. The way you speak to yourself becomes the tone of your life. The way you treat yourself becomes the standard you live by. The way you love yourself teaches others how to love you. And maybe tonight, after years of trying to fix everyone else, trying to earn love, trying to become more acceptable, you can gently turn inward and ask, what kind of relationship have I built with myself? Is it based on trust or criticism, compassion or punishment, respect or abandonment? Because the answer to that question shapes everything. And the beautiful truth is this: no matter what your relationship with yourself has looked like until now, it can change. You can begin again. You can learn to listen, to trust, to forgive, to protect, to encourage, to honor your own humanity. You can become the kind of presence you have always longed to find in others. Because perhaps the greatest love story of your life is not waiting somewhere in the future. Perhaps it begins the moment you decide that the person living inside your own heart deserves loyalty too. The moment you stop treating yourself as an afterthought. The moment you stop negotiating your worth. The moment you stop abandoning your needs to earn acceptance. The moment you finally say, I matter too. Because the way you love yourself shapes every relationship. And when you learn to love yourself with honesty, dignity, and compassion, you stop asking the world to complete you. You begin meeting it as someone who is already whole. And from that wholeness, every connection becomes less about survival and more about sharing the love you have finally learned to give yourself. Wholeness begins the moment you come home to yourself. Perhaps one of the greatest misunderstandings about healing is the belief that becoming whole means never needing anyone again. Many people hear words like self-love, inner peace, and wholeness, and imagine a person who no longer desires companionship, someone who never feels lonely, someone who is unaffected by loss, someone who never misses another human being, someone completely independent and untouched by the pain of life. But that is not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha never taught people to close their hearts. He never taught them to stop loving. He never taught them to become emotionally distant from the world. He taught freedom, and there is a profound difference between being whole and being closed. Wholeness does not mean you no longer desire connection. It means your connection to others is no longer built upon desperation. Wholeness does not mean you never experience loneliness. It means loneliness no longer convinces you that something is wrong with you. Wholeness does not mean heartbreak stops hurting. It means heartbreak no longer destroys your identity. Wholeness means remembering that before anyone entered your life, you existed. Before anyone chose you, you mattered. Before anyone understood you, you were worthy. Before anyone loved you, you belonged. For much of our lives, we are taught the opposite. We are taught to believe that another person will complete us, that somewhere in the world, there is someone who holds the missing pieces of our soul, someone who will rescue us from insecurity, someone who will finally silence our fears, someone who will make us feel enough. And so, many people spend years waiting, searching, longing, convinced that happiness lives somewhere outside of them, in the next relationship, the next marriage, the next friendship, the next person who promises never to leave. But what happens when that person disappoints you? What happens when they change? What happens when they leave? If your identity was built entirely around them, their absence feels like the end of you. You don't just lose a relationship, you lose your sense of self. Because somewhere along the way, You handed another person the responsibility of defining who you are. The Buddha understood that this is where suffering often begins. Not because people leave. People have always come and gone. Not because life changes. Life has always been changing. But because we forget that beneath all of life's changing circumstances, there is something within us that remains. Awareness remains. Presence remains. The quiet essence of who we are remains. Think about your own life. You have been many versions of yourself. You were once a child, then an adolescent, then an adult navigating responsibilities, heartbreaks, and unexpected changes. You have experienced joy, fear, loss, excitement, confusion. You have succeeded, you have failed, you have been loved, you have been rejected. Yet through every season of your life, there has been a silent presence witnessing it all. The awareness reading these words right now is the same awareness that watched you cry years ago, the same awareness that celebrated your happiest moments, the same awareness that survived everything you thought would destroy you. Something within you has always remained, and perhaps that is what wholeness truly means, not becoming someone new, but reconnecting with what has always been there, coming home to the self you abandoned while trying to become everything for everyone else, coming home to the self you ignored while chasing approval, coming home to the self you criticized, doubted, and neglected. There is a beautiful irony hidden in this journey. For years you searched outside yourself for what could only be rediscovered within. You searched for safety, but the safest place you ever needed was your own acceptance. You searched for belonging, but the first place you needed to belong was within your own heart. You searched for love, but the love you longed for was waiting beneath layers of fear and self-rejection. You searched for home, only to realize that home was never a place. It was a relationship, the relationship you build with yourself. Imagine what changes when you truly understand this. You still love people, but you stop making them your entire world. You still cherish connection, but you no longer lose yourself inside it. You still grieve endings, but you trust your ability to survive them. You still open your heart, but you stop handing away the keys to your identity, because wholeness creates stability. You no longer ask, will this person complete me? Instead, you ask, can we walk beside each other without abandoning ourselves? You stop chasing intensity. You start valuing peace. You stop seeking rescue. You begin seeking partnership. You stop begging to be chosen. You begin choosing consciously, because you finally understand that another person's love can enrich your life, but it cannot become your foundation. Your foundation must be built within. Many people fear this idea. They worry that becoming whole means becoming lonely, that loving themselves means they will stop needing others. But the opposite is often true. When you no longer seek people to fill your emptiness, you become capable of loving them more deeply. You stop trying to possess them. You stop demanding that they heal wounds they didn't create. You stop making them responsible for your happiness. You allow them to be human, imperfect, changing, free. And in that freedom, love becomes lighter, healthier, more honest. Because love rooted in wholeness says, I appreciate you deeply, but I do not lose myself in loving you. I welcome your presence, but I can survive your absence. I choose you, but I do not abandon myself. This is the kind of love the Buddha pointed toward. A love free from clinging. A love free from possession. A love grounded in awareness. A love that does not fear change because it understands the deeper truth. Nothing outside of you was ever meant to define who you are. Perhaps this is why so many people feel exhausted. They have spent years trying to become enough. Enough for their parents, enough for society, enough for partners, enough for strangers, enough for people who continually changed their expectations. But enoughness was never something you had to earn. It was something you forgot. The flower does not wake up wondering if it deserves to bloom. The moon does not apologize for taking up space in the night sky. The ocean does not question whether it is worthy of existing. Nature simply expresses itself. Yet human beings spend years doubting their own right to exist as they are. Wholeness is remembering what nature never forgot. You belong here. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to be imperfect. You are allowed to be fully human. Not because someone granted you permission, but because your existence itself is enough. Maybe tonight, after all the searching, after all the striving, after all the heartbreak and longing, you can stop asking, "What is missing from me?" and ask a gentler question instead. What parts of myself have been waiting for me to return? The part of you that stopped creating because they feared judgment, the part of you that silenced their voice to keep others comfortable, the part of you that believed they had to earn love, the part of you that forgot they were worthy before anyone else's opinion existed. Those parts have not disappeared. They have simply been waiting, waiting for your attention, waiting for your compassion, waiting for your return. And perhaps true healing is not about becoming a better version of yourself. Perhaps it is about becoming a more honest version of yourself, the version that no longer runs, the version that no longer hides, the version that no longer searches for home in places that require self-abandonment, the version that finally understands this: wholeness is not found at the end of another relationship. It is not hidden inside another person's approval. It is not waiting in some perfect future where you finally become enough. Wholeness begins the moment you stop leaving yourself behind, the moment you stop fighting your own humanity, the moment you stop treating yourself like a project that needs fixing, the moment you place your hand upon your own heart and whisper, "I am here, I am listening, I am not leaving." Because through every season of your life, through every goodbye and every beginning, through every mistake and every triumph, the one person who has always walked beside you is you. And perhaps the deepest peace life has to offer is realizing that you no longer need to search for the home you thought you lost, because home was never somewhere out there. Home has been waiting patiently within you all along. And tonight, after years of wandering, you finally remember the way back. Become the love you have been begging the world to give you. Perhaps this is the lesson your heart has been waiting for since the beginning of this journey, not because it is the easiest lesson, but because it changes everything. For most of your life, you may have been standing at the doors of other people's hearts, asking questions you never spoke out loud. Will you choose me? Will you stay? Will you finally see my worth? Will you give me the love I've been missing? You asked through your sacrifices, through your patience, through your silence, through the countless ways you tried to become easier to love. You became more understanding, more forgiving, more available, more accommodating. You ignored your needs, lowered your standards, overextended your heart. You gave people chances they had not earned. You carried emotional burdens that were never yours to carry. You poured love into everyone around you, hoping that eventually someone would pour the same love back into you. And maybe sometimes they did, for a while. Maybe someone made you feel special. Maybe someone convinced you that they would never leave. Maybe someone gave you just enough affection to keep your hope alive. But no matter how much love arrived from the outside, something inside still whispered, "It's not enough." Because what you were truly searching for was never simply another person's affection. You were searching for relief. Relief from self-doubt, relief from loneliness, relief from the fear that you were somehow incomplete. You wanted someone else's love to silence the question you had been carrying for years. Am I enough? And so you searched in relationships, in friendships, in achievements, in success, in approval, in being needed, in being admired, in being indispensable. You searched in the eyes of lovers, the applause of strangers, the gratitude of people you helped, the validation of people you barely knew. You searched everywhere. Everywhere except the one place where the answer had always been waiting, within yourself. The Buddha taught that suffering is born from craving, not because desire itself is wrong, but because we ask temporary things to satisfy eternal wounds. We ask people to heal what only awareness can transform. We ask relationships to give us an identity. We ask achievement to give us worth. We ask external love to replace inner abandonment, and then we wonder why nothing ever feels complete. The truth is this: no one can permanently love you enough to compensate for the ways you continue to reject yourself. No one can reassure you enough if you refuse to trust your own value. No one can stay close enough to silence the voice inside that insists you are unworthy. Because wherever you go, you take yourself with you. This is not meant to discourage you. It is meant to free you, because if the source of your suffering has always been within your relationship with yourself, then the source of your healing can be found there too. Imagine how many years you have spent begging the world for permission. Permission to rest, permission to take up space, permission to make mistakes, permission to say no, permission to stop proving, permission to believe that you matter. Imagine how exhausting that has been. Waking up each day wondering whether you have earned your place in the hearts of others, measuring your worth by responses, by compliments, by whether someone stayed, by whether someone left, living as though your value could rise and fall according to another person's opinion. No wonder you're tired. No wonder your heart feels exhausted. You were carrying an impossible burden, trying to collect enough love from the outside to finally believe what your soul has known all along. You are already enough. Not because you are perfect. You are not perfect. You have made mistakes. You have hurt people. You have disappointed others. You have disappointed yourself. You have doubted. You have failed. You have said things you regret. You have made choices you wish you could undo. You have fallen apart. You have lost your way. You have broken promises to yourself. You have struggled. You have survived. You have been human, and none of it has taken away your worth. The flower does not stop being beautiful because one petal falls. The ocean does not lose its vastness because of a storm. The moon does not disappear simply because clouds hide its light. And you do not become unworthy because life has left scars upon your heart. For so long, you have treated love as something you must earn. But what if love was never meant to be a reward? What if love was meant to be your way of being? What if becoming the love you seek means speaking to yourself gently, protecting your peace, honoring your needs, trusting your intuition, forgiving your mistakes, allowing yourself to rest without guilt, refusing to abandon yourself just because someone else is uncomfortable? What if becoming the love you seek means finally keeping the promises you make to yourself? The promise to stop chasing those who cannot choose you. The promise to stop explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. The promise to stop shrinking. The promise to stop apologizing for existing. The promise to stop treating yourself as if you are difficult to love. Imagine becoming the person your younger self needed most. The person who says, "I believe you. I am proud of you. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to prove your worth. You are allowed to cry. You are allowed to begin again. I will not abandon you." Can you imagine how healing that would be? Because perhaps what you've always needed was not another person to rescue you. Perhaps you needed to become a refuge for yourself, to become the safe place you have spent your entire life searching for. This does not mean you stop loving others. You will still love deeply, beautifully, openly. You will still allow people into your heart. You will still long for connection. You will still experience grief when people leave. Because awakening does not remove your humanity, but your love will change. It will no longer come from desperation. It will come from abundance. You will stop saying, "Please don't leave me, because I cannot survive without you," and begin saying, "I cherish you deeply, but I will not lose myself trying to keep you." You will stop begging to be chosen, because you have already chosen yourself. You will stop asking people to complete you, because you know you are already whole. You will stop making others responsible for your happiness, because you have learned how to sit beside your own heart. And perhaps this is the freedom the Buddha was pointing toward all along. Not detachment from love, but detachment from the belief that love exists only outside of you. The realization that the compassion you offer others belongs to you too. The understanding that your worth was never negotiable. The awakening that occurs when you stop running from yourself and finally turn inward. Maybe, after all these years, the person you have been waiting for is not someone arriving from the outside. Maybe it is you, the version of you who no longer abandons themselves, The version of you who trusts their own heart. The version of you who speaks kindly to their own mind. The version of you who no longer measures their value through the eyes of others. The version of you who finally understands that being chosen by everyone else means nothing if you continue rejecting yourself. Perhaps that version of you has been waiting patiently through every heartbreak, every disappointment, every lonely night, every unanswered prayer, every relationship that taught you what love is not, waiting for the day you stop looking outward long enough to notice them, waiting for the day you finally come home. And maybe that day is today. Maybe today is the day you stop begging the world to give you what you have refused to give yourself. Maybe today is the day you stop asking, "Who will save me?" and begin asking, "How can I care for the life already in my hands?" Maybe today is the day you place your hand over your heart and whisper words you have needed to hear for a very long time. I choose you. I forgive you. I believe in you. I will protect your peace. I will honor your truth. I will stop abandoning you. I will stop waiting for permission to love you. I am staying. Because people will come and go. Seasons will change. Life will continue to surprise and challenge you. But there is one relationship that will shape every moment you have left on this earth. The relationship you have with yourself. And perhaps the greatest transformation of all is realizing that you no longer need to spend your life begging the world for love. Because the love you have been seeking in every relationship, every achievement, every compliment, every goodbye, every person who failed to choose you, has been quietly waiting inside you all along, patient, steady, unconditional, waiting for the moment you finally stop searching and start remembering that you were never asking for too much. You were simply asking the wrong people for what only your own heart could truly provide. So become the love you have been begging the world to give you. Become the safe place. Become the understanding. Become the compassion. Become the acceptance. Become the loyalty, become the peace, become the home, and watch what happens when you no longer approach life as someone desperate to be loved, but as someone who has finally remembered that they already are. Because this is not the end of your journey, it is the beginning of returning to yourself, the beginning of loving without losing yourself, the beginning of living without begging, the beginning of freedom, and perhaps, after a lifetime of searching everywhere else, you finally discover that the greatest love story you were ever meant to experience was the one waiting patiently within you all along. As we come to the end of this journey, I want you to take a deep breath and remember something you may have forgotten for a very long time. You have spent years trying to be enough for everyone, enough to be chosen, enough to be loved, enough to be remembered, enough to be worth staying for. You have searched for your value in relationships, achievements, approval, and the changing opinions of people who were also trying to understand their own worth. You gave pieces of yourself away, hoping someone would finally hand you back the love you had been missing. But perhaps this entire journey was never about learning how to make other people love you. Perhaps it was about remembering how to stop abandoning yourself. Maybe the greatest heartbreak in your life was never that someone left. Maybe it was the countless times you left your own heart behind, trying to keep others close. And maybe the greatest healing begins when you decide that you will no longer do that. From this moment forward, may you stop chasing those who cannot choose you. May you stop begging for permission to take up space. May you stop measuring your worth through someone else's ability to recognize it. May you rest without guilt. May you speak to yourself with kindness. May you honor your needs without apology. May you trust the quiet wisdom within you. May you remember that being alone does not mean being unloved. And may you never again confuse self-abandonment with love. Because the truth is, you were never too much. You were never not enough. You were never broken beyond repair. You did not need to become someone else to deserve love. You only needed to return to the person you were before the world convinced you to search for yourself in the eyes of others. The love you have been waiting for, the acceptance you have been longing for, the peace you have been chasing, the home you thought you had lost, has been quietly living within you all along, waiting patiently for your return. So tonight, Before you seek another person's reassurance, before you ask the world to tell you who you are, place your hand over your heart and make this promise. I will stop abandoning myself. I will stop begging for what I can learn to give myself. I will honor my truth. I will protect my peace. I will choose myself again and again. I am staying, and perhaps that is the most powerful act of love a human being can ever make. Not finding someone who promises never to leave, but becoming the person who finally refuses to leave themselves. If this message touched something deep within your heart, let it be more than inspiration. Let it be a turning point, a quiet beginning, a sacred return. And if you're walking this path of healing and awakening with us, subscribe to Zen Path of Realization. Here we don't teach you how to become someone else. We help you remember who you have always been, beneath the fear, beneath the attachment, and beneath the noise of the world. Until we meet again, take care of your heart. Speak gently to your mind. Walk slowly with your soul. And never forget this: after a lifetime of searching for love everywhere else, the greatest love story you were ever meant to experience was always the one waiting for you within. Thank you for being here. May you be peaceful. May you be free from unnecessary suffering. May you remember your worth. And may you finally come home to yourself.